Good morning. Welcome to Church in Isolation again. My name's Bekah. I'm a member of staff at Maybridge Community Church, and if you're not a regular member, I'd like to really welcome you to our online service and just suggest that actually if you'd like to find out a little bit more about who we are, you Google us, Maybridge Community Church, or just go straight to maybridge.org.uk to find out a little bit more about how you can get in touch, how we could support you, or just to know who we are and to see some of the rest of the team and some of the rest of the activities that we do when the world is a little bit more normal. But for this morning, I'm just going to take the next few minutes to be taking a look at a little passage that, again, I think is really helpful for us in this time when the world has gone bonkers and life is not as we knew it, and things are difficult, and perhaps our minds are beginning to run away with themselves. So I want to have a little bit of a look at what the Bible has to say about how we can help our thoughts, perhaps to stay a little bit more under control, how we can find the kind of peace that Jesus promises to give those people who follow him, and what that might look like, and how maybe to demystify some of that. You see, sometimes I think we can think that this peace that passes all understanding that Jesus followers sometimes talk about, and a very particular Jesus follower, Paul, talked about when he was writing to some of the churches that he supported. It can feel like this thing that we somehow have to grasp hold of, and it's almost like a bit of magic that if we get the formula right, it will come, but there's not much we can do about it. But I want to look at this passage that gives us some tips actually of how to tap into that and how to look to God and align ourselves and to focus ourselves in a way that can help us to get there. So I want to look at a passage in the Bible that we find in the book of Philippians, a letter written by this man Paul to a church in a place called Philippi, and he was writing to them from far away, and he was writing to them in a very particular set of circumstances, but he's very concerned about how they're doing and what their anxiety levels are like. I mean, he doesn't use that language because he wrote 2,000 years ago, but I think if he was writing today, he would very much use that phrase. He'd be talking about anxieties and stresses. So anyway, let's pick up what he says in verse 6. He says this: "Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank him for all he's done. And then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus." And to start off with, there is this straightforward little bit of advice, which I think all of us would understand. Sometimes when we sit on our anxieties, and boy, is there a lot to be anxious about at the moment. Our health, the health of our loved ones, when we're going to see them again, our finances, our jobs, the future. It just goes on and on and on, doesn't it? If we stop, and if we just keep all of that in our heads, if we just keep mulling over it again and again and again, the fears just grow. And what Paul's saying is, I think in another version of the Bible, it gets translated like this: it says, turn your worries into arrows and shoot them to God as prayers, or something along those kind of lines. And actually, I know that often I can be worrying about something, and the minute I speak it out loud to a human or to God, it immediately feels as if actually the whole thing got a little bit smaller. And so there's this advice: pray about it, talk about it, keep the conversation going with God, tell him how you're feeling. It's one of the beautiful things about the Bible is that it shows us prayer after prayer after prayer of amazing heroes who aren't afraid to say how they feel to God. They don't try and make out that everything's wonderful. They don't try and make it all look rosy. They say things like, God, where are you? Even Jesus said, gosh, have you forsaken me? People go, are you there? It feels like you're hiding. And King David, who was described as a man after God's own heart, still had these moments where he said, why have you left me? Why have you forsaken me? It feels as though you're not with me. Even though it wasn't true. He wasn't afraid to express sadness. He wasn't afraid to express fear. He wasn't afraid to express, frankly, a lack of faith. But he kept on talking to God. He prayed about everything. And I think sometimes it's in the praying that we're able to remember who God is. And he's able to, if we stop talking long enough to listen, speak back to us. But actually, what I love about this passage, it doesn't stop there. It carries on as Paul continues with some really very good advice for how to get your minds under control. So let's carry on reading and pick it up in the next verse, in verse 8. And he says this: finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you've learnt or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Now, I wish I had that kind of confidence of Paul to be able to say, whatever you've seen in me, put it into practice. But I'm not going to say that, because I probably need to practice what I preach just as much as the next person. But actually, it's that beginning part of that which I find so interesting. And as I was growing up, I always heard these verses in the context of trying to make sure that you didn't watch stuff on TV that wasn't edifying, was probably the word we'd have used back then, that wasn't good for you. You didn't read books that weren't good for you. You didn't buy magazines off the shelf that were going to corrupt your mind. And it was a lot about what do you choose to fill your mind with, which actually is good. It's good and right and proper. You know, what you choose to feed your brain will fundamentally affect your growth. What you choose to put in will reflect then what comes back out of you. And choosing to focus your mind, you know, and to read and to watch, you know, we live in a day, don't we, where we've got so much at our fingertips that we can watch. My children have just got very excited about the new Disney Channel and have pooled their money into getting a subscription, so we shall have Disney and Marvel and all sorts all the time. But there's a lot of programs that I would rather they didn't watch. There's a lot of programs that as they've been growing up, we've steered them away from. And actually over this next few months, as we're stuck in, the temptation is going to be to watch all kinds of things. And I guess just as a bit of an aside here, really, it's that let's just be careful. Let's be careful about what we get ourselves sucked into and hooked onto, and what we choose to fill our minds with. But that isn't really where I want to land, because the thing that has really transformed me, I think, as I've read this passage in more recent years, is thinking about it slightly differently. Because I think that actually what we choose to focus our mind on isn't just what we read in books, or just what we watch on television, or even just the conversations that we have. It's about becoming much more intentional about what we choose to think of. And I don't know what fills your mind, but I wonder if actually, as we're living in this world of, you know, heightened anxiety at the moment, it's worth stopping to think about what are the things that keep you awake in the middle of the night. What are those things? Now, I don't know if you're somebody who sleeps with the greatest of ease, who puts your head on the pillow and you're flat out, you know, sparko till the morning. Or if perhaps you're somebody who's a little bit more like me, who if there's something going on in my mind, I might go to sleep, but I'll wake up again. And then I find it really hard to go back to sleep. I can lie awake worrying. In fact, I am a bit of a moron. Here's an admission for you. I can worry about nothing in the middle of the night. I can wake up and worry about things that aren't even real. Might be dreams, might be something that I think is going to happen tomorrow, but in my foggy-minded state, I don't even realise it's not even happening tomorrow. It's happening a fortnight away. In fact, as a kid, I used to be terrible. I used to wake up and worry about having a test the next day that I hadn't revised for, and it wasn't even a thing. I was a good girl. I'd always revise the text next day, but I'd wake up in this panic that there was something I was meant to be doing and I wasn't prepared and I was going to get caught out. And in that state, I could get myself so wound up that I would eventually, honest, like real vulnerability here, I'd be physically sick. And I'd, run to the bathroom and my mum would realise, and I was always quite disappointed when she'd send me to school the next day because I'd be like, I was ill, 48-hour rule. And she'd go, you weren't really ill. You just literally worried yourself sick. She was a good mum. She wasn't a mean mum. She just knew me well enough to know that there wasn't really anything wrong with me, just that my brain had gone out of control in the middle of the night. Now, nowadays, I can spot that coming, and I've learned some tips to steer myself around those moments. It's not usually tests anymore, but it can be things that I think are happening tomorrow that I'm not prepared for. It might be a sermon. It might be a job interview. It might be a conversation that I'm nervous about having. The truth is I can lie awake at night sometimes worrying about finances, or I can lie awake worrying about one of the kids. There are so many things, and at the moment there are so many more things. And I know I'm not the only person who does this. I like to call these things the distractors. If you've read Harry Potter in any shape or form, you'll have come across the Dementors. And these are the distractors. These are the things, though, that come into our heads and minds and begin to take over. And I wonder what those things are in your brain. I wonder what are the things that are able to come in and you don't even spot them coming sometimes, but suddenly they fill your brain and they take over everything, and you're unable to think of anything else. You get that feeling in the pit of your stomach, or for some people you get like a tightness in your chest or a headache, or wherever it is that stress resides in your body as you become overwhelmed and overtaken by the fear and the anxiety and just the overwhelm of it all. Sometimes it's the things that we long for, isn't it? Sometimes it's the longing for stuff that we don't have, things that are understandable. We long to have children, but we can't conceive. We long to have a life partner, but we don't seem to be able to find one. We long for a day gone past, frankly. We long for a job. We long for all kinds of perfectly legitimate things. But actually, the longing has become, it's got out of proportion. It's taken up too much of our brain. Or perhaps your distractor looks more like self-doubt. Perhaps it looks like, I'll never be good enough. I just can't get this done. I just don't think I'm going to better pass this test. There's a whole bunch of GCSE and A-level students who don't have to anymore. And, on one level, that's a relief for some of them, although it's a stress of its own, isn't it? It might be that it's about what other people think about you. So often we worry and we fear other people, and we fear other people's judgment and what they think about us. Or maybe it's a conversation we've had, or a falling out that we've had, and we just can't get it out of our head because it's not resolved and it's not better, and we haven't made it good, and we don't know how to, and we don't know what to say, and we don't know how to fix it, and we long to fix it. We long to bring it back. And at the moment, perhaps it's the fear of where the next paycheck is coming from, and the fear of what's going to happen with the rent, or where the food is coming from. We're facing problems we haven't always had to face for a very long time, aren't we? And they're totally out of our control. And if we're not careful, we're losing control of our minds in the midst of it. We're losing control because these fears and these doubts and these things that we don't know are taking over and becoming everything. And that's when I think it's good to come back to this passage. I think that's good when it's good to come back to whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. And it is easier said than done sometimes, but this is about getting so intentional about our thought life. It's about beginning to spot when our brain is spiraling out of control. It's beginning to recognise, oh my goodness, I've started down this road. Just like me in the middle of the night when I start to feel sick and think, oh, if I carry on down this road, it's going to become a physical event. Like, I need to do something. I need to switch my brain. And in the middle of the night, sometimes it's as simple as picking up my phone and reading a Bible passage and switching my brain into another mode. If it's not the middle of the night and I'm allowed to turn a light on, it might be as simple as sitting down and writing out a list of 10 things that I am grateful for, or 5 things, or 3 things. I do it with my kids sometimes. When they were younger, I've got one daughter in particular, again, not naming her, there's 5 of them. They're pretty anonymous if I talk about them. But one daughter for whom she can catastrophize pretty well. So she could have had a great day. One bad thing happens towards the end of the day, and suddenly it's the worst day in the world. Suddenly everything's coming to an end. Suddenly the world hates her. She's got no friends, and everything else is just going horrific. And so, one of the things that I learned to do with her very early on, even when she was 7 or 8, is at bedtime, if she'd gone into this, the world is the end of, it's the end of the world mode, I'd sit there and we'd say, do you know what? Let's see if we can get to 5 good things that have happened today. She'd go, I can't, there isn't anything. But it cut the chain of thought off sometimes. I go, no, come on, we can think of something. Even if the first thing is just that you had chocolate spread on toast for breakfast and that was a treat. She'd go, oh yeah, well that was a treat. And I go, come on, let's have something else. Well, actually, I did have quite a good game with my friends at school today, and go, brilliant, that's 2. What about number 3? And usually we'd get beyond the 5 challenge and we'd get up to nearer 10, because actually once you are able to take your mind and take control of your thoughts and start pointing your focus into a different direction, actually it's often amazing how quickly those fears begin to subside. It's often, it's astounding how quickly that happens. But it's about spotting that you're going off in this direction and choosing to put a halt in it and point yourself back in this direction. Just realised you can't actually see my hands very well here, just my arms as I spread them out. But it matters. We need to be really, really intentional about these things. So I want to issue you a couple of challenges as we think about how we can get control of our minds and our anxieties and our fears and all the things that are crowding in and threatening to take over. And the first is this: keep talking to Jesus. Keep doing it. Keep praying. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Keep talking to Jesus. There's an old hymn that I still really love that says, "Fix your eyes upon Jesus, look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace." And really that leads into that next bit of what Paul was talking about, because the truth is there is nothing more true. There is nothing more noble. There is nothing more lovely or excellent or praiseworthy than Jesus. So when our fears threaten to crowd in, let's focus on him. Let's look to him. Let's read his word in the Bible. Let's talk to him in our prayers. Let's have conversations with other people that lift our spirits and help us to focus on what is good in our world. Let's write those lists. In fact, maybe that's something to do when you've finished here. I don't know if you're watching on your own or you're watching with other people. Maybe if you're watching on your own, you can take time out to pray, to verbalize your fears, but then to stop and to think and to list the things that you're grateful for, the places that you can see where God has provided, where he is providing, and where you can see that he's brought you comfort. Because actually, as we grasp hold of our minds and we focus on whatever is true and we think about such things, then I really do know that what Paul says is true. The God of peace will be with you, and that peace that passes understanding will be too. So let me finish by praying. And then I'll leave you with a song. Father God, you are the Prince of Peace, the King of everything, the Lord of all. And yet so often we forget what that means for us. So often we allow other things to dominate our minds. We allow other things to be actually the Lord of our thoughts, our fears and our worries and anxieties. And for that, we want to say sorry. Not thank you. We want to say sorry. We want to lift those things to you and say, here you are, here are our anxieties about money, our anxieties about family, our anxieties about the future, our anxieties about the now, our anxieties about the food and the supermarkets and the germs and everything else that threatens to overwhelm us. And we lift that to you and we ask that we can leave that safely in your hands. We ask that you would give us your peace. We choose to look at you. We choose to look at your goodness. We choose to remember all that you have done year after year, day after day in our lives and in the lives of your people. Help us to draw strength from where we've seen you provide in the past, and help that to build our faith that you will continue to do that in our lives now. That we will, in times in the future, be able to tell our children and our grandchildren and anybody who we could come across of the things that you have done today, in this day, in this time, and in this place. You are such a good God, Lord Jesus, and we choose to focus on you and to accept in return that peace that only comes from you, that passes and exceeds all understanding. Amen. So, I'm going to leave you to do that. Go and write your lists. Go and have the conversations with the others in your family, and be intentional about where you choose to place your thoughts and how you can help each other to redirect your focus when it begins to shoot off down a difficult path. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.